All right, everybody, welcome back. Happy Tuesday. Today we have the topic Agents Beware. Uncle Tim, I know you have a couple things that you wanted to bring up and at least touch on, but we're going to keep it short and sweet, and talk about some of these new trending things that are out there that you guys should all be aware of.
Okay, well, whether you're on the buyer's side or the listing side, there's things that we have to all make sure we're paying attention to the details on, as we're calling this call Agent Beware. Kong, if you want to start out with, I know you have a list of a couple things you'd like to talk about as to problems that we're seeing and calls that we're getting from agents. So do you want to go through the first one, Kong?
Yeah, one of the first thing is and these are things that we take for granted until they actually come up, and then agents come to Tim, myself, and Brooks, and then we're like rereading the contract ourselves and looking things up and trying to analyze things. And one of the big things that has come up is the deposit, right? That's a big part of the deal, because when it goes awry, the deal, the first thing everybody wants to know is who gets the deposit, right? That's what everybody wants to know, is who gets the deposit. So a couple things to be aware of is the deposit, get it on time. I know right now it says 5 days, but with the competitive nature of some of these listings, you may want to ask for the deposit like within 1 day, right? Or at least something faster than 5 days. It can be wired in now. You can ask Erin for the instructions, and she can provide it to the buyer so that they can wire the funds in and have it ready for us. But you definitely don't want to not have a deposit and allow somebody to do the home inspection, especially when they have the home inspection contingency, right? Because I'm not sure if you realize this coincides with box 26G. Does everybody know that box?
Tell us about it, please.
Let me share my screen real quick. So box 26G, everybody can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So line 733, box G, seller is limited to retaining those sums paid by buyer, including deposit monies, as liquidated damages. So everybody check marks this. I notice about 90% of the contracts I receive has this check mark, but I often wonder if agents actually understand what that means, okay? So PAR actually has a guideline to the agreement of sale. They actually have a guideline for every form. If you just go into PAR's website, log in, and go through their forms library, every form has a guideline for the use, okay? And if we scroll down, on this guideline, and we come to subparagraph G, liquidated damages. If the checkbox in the subparagraph is checked, seller's options in case of buyer's default are limited to the amount of the deposit monies that have already been paid as liquidated damages. So if you allow a home inspection to occur and the buyer backs out, or if they have cold feet and they back out after 2 days and there's no money in the account, the most the seller can collect, if this box is checked, is $0. Okay. So it's so important to get that deposit money as soon as you can. And I think that's something that we leave for granted because it's just already there on the contract. It says 5 days, we'll get it, whatever, and not even think about it. But I think there has to be more of a sense of urgency to get that deposit money. What do you think, Tim?
Could you also go back to, on that contract, the number of days, the default is 180, And let's go back to that.
Yes.
So that's line 711, number C. Colin, can you read that?
Yeah, subparagraph C. So what this part is it's in the agreement of sale, right? And the buyer and seller are pre-agreeing to what happens to the deposit money in case there's a dispute, okay? That's how I explain it to sellers and buyers when I go over this section is it's an agreement that we make right up front if there's a dispute, okay? And what it states is buyer and seller agree that if there is a dispute over the entitlement of deposit monies that is unresolved for blank days after the settlement date stated in paragraph 4A or any written extensions, or following termination of the agreement, whichever is earlier, okay, then the broker holding the deposit money will, within the next 30 days of receipt of buyer's written request, distribute the deposit monies to buyers unless the broker is in receipt of verifiable written notice that the dispute is subject of litigation or mediation. So, for
So the
example, in this
reason,
case, if you hold the money for 180 days and on day 181, the buyer requests the money, then within the next 30 days, the broker is obligated to return the deposit money.
and the reason I wanted to bring that up, Kong, was we still have agents who are representing buyers who don't amend that 180 days to, let's just say, 30 days hypothetically.
Sure.
And then there are still agents and sellers who, even though the buyers are technically entitled to their deposit back, the sellers get mad and just say, screw it, I'll just wait 180 days and won't allow them to have the money released to them. So if you want to make sure your buyers are more protected in the ability to request the deposit or take it to mediation or something like that, you need to amend that 180 days default to something similar to a 30 or 45 days, which helps the process speed along a little bit quicker. So I just wanted to bring that up because we are still having those situations where the agents call me up and say the seller won't return my deposit, and we'll say, what does the contract say? And
Yeah.
they forgot to amend that. So that's
Yeah.
the first thing about deposits we want to talk about. Colin, what's another part of deposits that we want to talk about with regards to, let's just say, mortgage commitments and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Just a tip is sellers will typically want longer days, and buyers, you want to have shorter days on that box. Okay.
Mhm.
Tim, before I go into the commitment letter, one
Yeah.
of the things too with this box G, okay, everybody used to want to give $1,000 deposit or 2,000 or 1% of the sales price, right? If it's a low deposit, okay, if you're going to accept a low deposit as a listing agent, you may want to say, that's fine, we'll take your $2,000 deposit on this $700,000 house, but leave this checkbox blank, because if you back out, my seller then can go after your buyer for damages such as, hey, we moved out of this house, we rented another house, we moved out of state, you know, the passage of time, the interest rates have gone up, right? And now it's not the same, the house does not have the same value or something. So if you're going to take a small deposit on the list side, maybe leave that box unchecked.
Also, too, when you're, when you're in negotiations on a contract, and let's say the winning offer is one with a small deposit, you can always counter back to them and ask for an additional deposit to be made within another 5 days or a certain period of time. Most of these homes today are $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, which means the people are going to put a significant amount of money down to buy the home. So you know, a $2, $3, $4, $5,000 deposit is not enough. Somebody would walk away from $5,000. They're less likely to walk away from $10,000 or $20,000. So it was one of the things that we learned from Steve Thompson years ago was you want to keep these deals solid, get bigger deposits. So I just think that that's really important, that it's okay to counter back asking for a larger deposit because these people have the money in the bank to buy this home. Why not put it down in good faith? So what's next, Kong, that you want to talk about
Okay, the
in
next
regards to the
one is
deposits?
one that people are missing quite a bit, and I think it's because of the placement. We've talked about this before. The placement of the blank spot, which is the commitment date, right? I think as a company, we're pretty good about this. We know where it's at. It's right above the mortgage uh, disclosure, okay, of the loan amount and such. But again, if you're going to elect the mortgage contingency, fill in a commitment date, right? You have to have that commitment date. And not only do you have to fill it in, you have to remember it. I don't know what you have to do to remember it. Put it in your phone as a event or whatnot, so that on that day or a couple days before, you reach out to the lender and make sure you get that commitment letter. Okay.
And
Because
that's an important date to fill out. I just was
yeah,
involved with one of our agents and some attorneys on the phone, which our agent left that commitment date blank. That means that they have up until the day of settlement to provide that commitment letter. And the sellers in this particular case were upset because the agent did not have a date in there or did not recommend a date in there to protect the seller's interests. So it's important to fill that date out. Now, up until whatever date you have in there, let's just say that settlement date is supposed to be June 30th, and we want the commitment by June 1st. Okay, Kong, explain what happens if you have June 1st in there for commitment and somebody wants out of the deal.
you're
So
saying
let's
settlement
say
date
it's
30th. So
second now. Let's just hypothetically say it's June 2nd and the seller has not received the commitment.
sure.
What happens at that point?
Yeah, the seller can send over a termination. Let's look at line 164 here, number 2. Okay. Seller may terminate this agreement after the commitment date by written notice to buyer if A, seller does not receive a copy of the documentation demonstrating the mortgage lender's conditional or outright approval of buyer's mortgage application by the commitment date, right? It doesn't say anything other than the fact that the seller hasn't received it. So if you're a buyer agent and you got this commitment letter 2 days ago and it's just sitting in your email box and you don't send it over to the seller, the list agent, and it's sitting in your email box, and the seller and the list agent terminates the day after the commitment date is the commitment letter is due, that looks really bad for you. I mean, your buyer is gonna be really upset.
Right, because the buyers had expenses in this transaction. They're ready to go, and the agent failed to provide the commitment letter that might be in their email. And now all of a sudden the seller terminates the deal, and you got to make a phone call to your buyer and tell them the deal's terminated. And it would be your fault. So it is extremely important. And I said this a couple weeks ago on one of my emails, how important it is for us to not only understand these contracts, and if you don't understand them, go back and watch our YouTube videos about each aspect of the contract that we've gone over multiple times. But it's not only important for us to understand it, it's important for us to continue to review it. And Seth, it's also important for you to remind these buyer's agents that, hey, have you gotten the commitment? And we need that by such and such a date. Because if you mess up and don't follow that, it's your fault. That your buyer could have lost this transaction because you didn't follow up on it, and you might have already had it. Now, if you follow up on it and you still don't have a commitment, that's a different story. Then the seller still can terminate. But there are cases where these lenders have sent them. It might have gone into your junk mail. So it's important for you to be following up on these details. And if you don't have it, call the lender and find out what it is, and remind them that by June 1st, we were supposed to have a commitment date, a commitment letter. And it's not necessarily, Kong, if you can explain it, a clear to close at this point. It's just a commitment, even if it's subject to certain
Yes.
aspects.
And that actually goes into part B and C. Part B here states, again, seller may terminate if the documentation, the commitment letter, demonstrating lender's conditional or outright approval of buyer's mortgage application does not satisfy the loan terms outlined in paragraph 8F. So maybe in 8F up here, this box, right? They have down that they're getting a conventional loan, and then you get this commitment letter, and now all of a sudden it's an FHA loan.
Exactly. So not only is it important to check these things out, but there have been a lot of cases. I know some of the people on this call, we've had it recently, where the buyers have changed the type of loan that they've gotten. Now, if I can bring Brooks into the call now, Brooks just received a situation like this where the people waived financing. Okay, I think I'm correct with that. And then all of a sudden, the waiver of financing, again, doesn't mean that the buyer won't try to obtain financing. It just says that they've waived it. Well, what happened in this particular case was they waived financing, they've waived appraisal contingencies, and then all of a sudden, Brooks, if I'm not wrong on this, you received a documentation that they wanted them to sign your seller to sign the FHA amendatory clause. Now, the problem with having your sellers sign this amendatory clause is now all of a sudden you're subject to the terms and conditions of an FHA or VA transaction, which means the property must appraise, even though they waived financing. So Brooks, if you could explain how you handled that, because you did it very well with that agent, and I think the agent understood how you caught that. But you caught it because you were up on the details and didn't let somebody slip something by you. So please explain how that worked.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. We received an offer. It actually had a proof of funds, so they were intending on paying cash at one point in time. But like you stated, the contract doesn't exclude the right for them to obtain financing on the property. It's just not contingent upon them getting that financing. So if for some reason they can't get the financing by the time of settlement, they either need to close on the property with cash, or their earnest money deposit would be at risk. The only issue I had was when I got an email from the buyer's lender stating that they were getting an FHA loan and they would be sending over a couple documents, including the FHA mandatory clause, which, as everybody knows, pertains to the box that Kong has on that screen saying that the property has to appraise for the purchase price. So this was relatively new. It was like 2 days after we went under contract. And I, called the buyer's agent and got a conference call with her and the lender and just explained to him, hey, look, You presented us a waived, mortgage contingency offer, gave us proof of funds. You were insinuating that you were paying cash. I agree. Look, you guys can put financing on the property. You have every right to do so by the agreement of sale. The only contentions we have is if we go forward and we allow our seller to sign off on an FHA amendatory clause, that compromises all the enticing features of your offer to them when they were picking it amongst competition. And there were other offers we had that had appraisal gap coverage and in similar stuff. They also were the highest offer in this scenario. But I just said, look, we have no problems with them getting conventional or any other type of financing aside from, VA, you would have the same sort of problem, but the house has to appraise for the purchase price, and we're not going to sign off on an FHA amendatory clause. So if you can get it without us signing off on it, good for you. But if not, I'm not informing my clients that they should sign off on that because you accepted an offer with essentially no appraisal contingency.
Okay, good. Kong, anything else on deposits that are on your list that you want to bring up?
Yeah, you just got to be very careful with that. When people waive the mortgage commitment and they get an FHA, Brooks, I don't even know if they have to sign that amendatory clause because it's in the contract already too, right?
It is, although if it's not an FHA deal at the time that the contract was written, it's not applicable. And
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it might be a question we should raise to the hotline, but
Yeah.
I think it's in the seller's favor in that they put together a offer that showed proof of funds with, cash reserves to pay for the whole transaction. They didn't give me a pre-approval letter with an FHA loan. At which point, being a listing agent, you can read through that and know that the house is at that point in time going to have to appraise for whatever purchase price it plays out to be. Again, they didn't do that. They gave proof of funds, and we're not saying they can't get financing on the property. We're just not changing the terms of the contract by signing an FHA amendatory clause, which ultimately does change the terms that we agreed to and set forth in the beginning.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
okay. Other ways that agents are slipping through.
Hey, can I ask a question about that?
Yes,
So what if you told them, well, go get your appraisal. If it appraises high enough, then we'll sign it.
you could do that. In this particular case, he explained to that agent that it wasn't part of the agreement of sale, and they agreed to do conventional, I think, wasn't it, Brooks?
Yeah, so ultimately, the lender, appreciated my explanation and where we were coming from. We weren't trying to be hard or difficult or anything. She said, actually, this buyer was working to improve their credit anyway, and the terms of a conventional loan will be more favorable to them anyhow if they were able to get their credit up, which she was very confident that they were able to do anyhow. And the father really did. The father was buying it for a daughter and was co-signing for the loan. But if for some reason they couldn't get the financing, they were going to go forward with cash. So their earnest money deposit wasn't at risk. Ultimately, she got approved for conventional, and we're moving forward with them trying to obtain this conventional loan before settlement.
So Brooks, back to deposits again. We've seen some cases now where people have waived financing, have waived inspections, and all of a sudden they go through the walkthrough they want to terminate the deal and get their deposit back. Can you explain some of the situations that we've had recently where that has happened? How they're
Yeah.
trying to use the walkthroughs as their method to get out?
Yeah, this is definitely, in my opinion, a trendy thing right now by, um, crafty buyer's agents who may or may not be explaining this to their clients, but essentially what they're doing is scrutinizing the seller's property disclosure statement. And if for some reason they do a walkthrough and something doesn't perfectly align with that seller's property disclosure statement, um, i.e., I had an instance where somebody did a walkthrough and there was a scratch or a chip out of the cooktop range on the counter. And then also the one pull handle for the refrigerator wasn't missing. Now, both these things were like that. When we marketed the property, we put on the photos, they're displayed, in the marketing photos, but they weren't noted on the seller's property disclosure as, there was a chip in the cooktop, there was a missing handle on the refrigerator. So the agent did their walkthrough with the buyer and said, hey, you know, the buyer noted that these things were not the same as what was in the property disclosure statement, and they're broken, and we're requesting $3,000 to replace them. So I, had a conversation with the buyer's agent and said, these are imperfections. They're by no means broken. Are they perfect? No, but both of them are in perfect working order and are functioning for their intended use. The refrigerators maintaining temperature, the freezers maintaining temperature, the cooktop operates as it should. They're by no means broken. They're imperfections. There's a big difference. Ultimately, they sided with, I guess, my opinion and said, we're not going to push the issue and move forward. But these are the sort of things that, again, are kind of trendy that buyer's agents are trying to implement and kind of take a second bite at the apple after they're already under contract.
They're also visible. They were all visible. They weren't hidden defects.
Right. They're in
Because I
plain
think
sight, out in the open. Yeah.
right, because I think the property disclosure talks, I'm not sure, Colin, if this is right, about are there any other, hidden defects that you might be aware of, that type of thing.
Right.
But these were all visible that were even in the photos of the listing when the property was put up for sale.
Right.
All right, so, these type of things are coming up. I would suggest, again, if you're at the end of the transaction, somebody's doing a walkthrough and there's a problem, call us so that we can talk about it, to make sure we're all on the same page as to what our opinions are, to hold these people's feet to the fire and don't allow them to get out and mess up the transaction at that point in time. Kong, any other things on deposits or any other agent beware issues that you
Yeah,
can bring up at this point?
Just the commitment letter, not only receive it, but actually read the commitment letter, because there's probably outstanding conditions that have to be met. And if they're not conditions that are normal or that were disclosed to you, that may be something that brings a red flag, especially when you get the letter a week before settlement and it says a car payment has to be paid off or a credit card has to be paid off, right? Or now their house has to sell. You have to call the buyer agent and just say, look, this thing says a car has to be paid off in order for your people to buy this house. Are they able to pay this car off? I mean, that's the type of stuff that can come up that delays your settlement.
Right.
The other thing that came up, and it hit me last night when I was sitting with a seller filling out the property disclosure, and I asked him what was staying, what he was taking with him, and he had a nice little plastic shed in the back. I mean, it's pretty big, and I asked him about the shed, and he brought up the fact that he wanted to take it with him. Okay. So if I didn't know that, I probably wouldn't have included that particular item in the excluded, or asked him to identify what was staying, what was not. One of the things that I think we need to really kind of have a grasp in our head is items that are remaining, that's already in the contract. And one of the items is storage shed. That stays, unless you mentioned that it's not staying, right, under the excluded. So it's in my head now that when I get an agreement of sale on this property, I better see under excluded the storage shed, because that's how we're going to advertise it in Bright.
Yep.
So these items, what do we have here? The plumbing, heating, gas, fire logs, radiator covers, hardwired security systems, thermostats, lighting fixtures. Thermostat's a big one because some people like to take their fancy Nest ones these days, right? Chandeliers, ceiling fans, pools, spas, and hot tubs, including covers and cleaning equipment. Electric animal fence systems, excluding the collars, garage door openers and transmitters, mounting brackets and hardware for television and sound equipment, unpotted shrubbery, plantings and trees, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, sump pumps, storage sheds, fences, mailboxes, wall-to-wall carpeting. Okay, so that excludes your rugs. Existing window screens, storm windows and screen doors, windows, window covering hardware, including rods and brackets, shades and blinds, awnings, central vac systems with attachments, built-in air conditioners, built-in appliances, the range, oven, dishwashers, trash compactors, any remaining heating and cooking fuel stored on the property. So you have an oil tank and you're selling the property and there's enough to last the seller, maybe tell them not to fill it up, okay? Because if they fill it up, whatever is there stays, right?
That's a big one that normally happens
Right.
with regards to propane tanks and oil tanks, unless the seller arranges to have them pumped
Right.
to the walkthrough in the settlement, because whatever's there at the day of the settlement remains and belongs to the buyer at no cost, at no
Right.
additional cost.
If owned, solar panels, windmills, water treatment systems, propanes, and satellite dishes. Unless otherwise stated, the following items are included in the sale at no additional cost. Now, there's also a B, a C, and a D. C is for items that are not owned by the seller, but subject to the lease or other financing agreements. Solar panels, windmills, water treatment systems, propane tanks, and satellite dishes. And then
Those are important, Kong, that when you are listing a home and you see a water softener system or solar panels or any of those things that are in item C, you need to find out, again, is the propane tank owned or is it leased? And if it's leased, you need to get a copy of the lease. Is this water softener system owned or is it leased? You know, do they make a payment on it every month? Because these are important things to get information on. The big one nowadays, Kong, is the solar panels, right? So can you just talk briefly on that, on how important it is when you're listing a property to know upfront and get all the information on these solar panels?
yeah, it's they're not actually difficult to deal with as long as you do all the prep work and the buyer is making sure that they get the financing or taking over the financing and qualifying for the financing to take over the lease. But I think the biggest thing is just upfront in the disclosure. There is actually a section now in the property disclosure that talks about solar panels I believe it's on page 12, right by the part where it talks about the electric. Okay. And it asks if the solar panels are leased or not, and that's the seller's first opportunity to disclose what they have. The second part could be put in either the agent remarks or the public remarks, as far as what type of system you have, if they're leased or owned, and if they who the buyer has to reach out and get qualified through. So
I just
those are
want
the
to add
type
a
of things
couple of
you have
things
to make
to
sure
the solar panels.
you have to do. What's that, Aaron?
We have, this is becoming a lot more popular than it used to be. We have probably about 8 different files between title and Remax right now that have solar panels. Our agents have been amazing at fully disclosing, so we're great on that part. Some of them are paying them off. We've had 2 that have recently paid them off, which was fine. We did recently find out with 2 different companies, if they are paid off though, they no longer have any warranty on them. So they don't service them. So it's great that they're paid off and the buyer doesn't have to pay for them. However, they have no service to them either. So that's one thing to look out for. We have another deal that's probably falling through because the buyer's agent has no idea about solar panels and never qualified her buyers, and now they don't qualify because of the payment. So there's quite a few on both of, we had some on the selling and buying side, but they had already like started the process to get approved to do the transfer agreement. So they do have to, like Kong said, to make sure that they're doing this, but unfortunately, it's the others agents that aren't very knowledgeable, and that's where we're running into issues.
Well, this is true because I have that deal that's probably falling apart. And you really have to educate the other agents because solar panels are not utility bills. You cannot, there is no way that you can qualify your buyer by telling your lender that you don't have an electricity bill, so your solar panel bill is your utility bill. It's happening. It's happening out there. They're just, I don't know if people just really don't know or if they're just trying to get away with something else in the contract. But I had a big awakening this week. Thank God I have my Remax family behind me because Kong and Seth are my heroes today for getting through the last week and a half with just crazy people. And I feel I've been in real estate over 20 years now, and I know that contract inside and out, but I have become complacent. And, that it just happens. It just happens. You move into a different chapter of your life and solar panels are new. And, I had a deal that I could have lost, but I never got the commitment letter. And I knew I didn't get it, but for some reason it just slipped my mind. So thank you, Remax family, for bringing me back to reality.
Thank you, Diane. And again, it's important that, we're being paid a lot of money on these transactions, and it's important that we pay attention to the details. Kong, anything else you want to wrap up with any other agent beware situations?
Yeah, as always, I always end on the very last page of the agreement of sale, right? This little section down here, right? This was an example I used. This additional terms. If you receive a contract or if you plan on writing a contract and you feel that you have to write something in there, call me first, okay? We should never have to write anything in here. There's a form for that, whatever it may be, okay? So if you receive a contract or you are writing one and you feel like you have to write something in here, call me first, please. Because most of the times, and even if it's on a general addendum too, okay? One of those blank addendums, because most of the times issues come from this part here, is one party understands it a certain way, then the other party all of a sudden may have understood it this way, but now they're twisting your words and finding a way out because of something, you know, and it never fails. That's what happens. So bad news comes when that part is filled out or written.
Correct. Yep. Brooks, anything else you'd like to add to Agent Beware's at this point in time?
No, I think it was a good call.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating in it. And
Just a reminder, renew your real estate licenses if you have not yet. You have 16 days. I know a lot of people like waiting to the very last minute. I'm stalking you. I'm texting you. I'm going to start calling you. It's just really important. There's no leeway. So if you're not renewed by the 31st, you cannot practice real estate.
and if you can't get into any of these classes, get online and take them. It doesn't take that long to get them done if you do them online. So it's important. You know, you're not an agent anymore. If you don't renew that license on time, you're in trouble. So it happens every year. So please, or every other year, please get that done. Aaron, anything else on any company events coming up here?
Yeah, we have the ride and drive that's going to be in June coming up. Brooks has already created the flyer and everything. We're
What's the
going
date
to
on that?
start promoting that. That is
15th.
15th.
Yep.
June 15th. It's a Saturday, so we're going to keep the same route. It'll be super fun. The money is for Penn State Children's Hospital. We're going to do and Brenna's been doing a newsletter if you guys haven't seen. So she does have a list of upcoming dates for different things. The ice cream social, we're doing one here. We're doing one in Chambersburg. We're going
The
to
Leak
have
Open House is June 8th.
the what?
Leak Open House event is June 8th.
Okay. We have
Again,
the
so
golf
anybody that
tournament.
wants to donate $1 or $2 to the Wounded Veterans Organization of Leak, you still have time to do that.
Yep. Yeah, so we're doing really great with the golf tournament. We've gotten sponsors already. So we're going to start marketing that a little bit more too after we get through the ride and drive. But I've been really reaching out to like businesses and stuff, and property management's been helping Alyssa and Tammy. So yeah, my mom, but yeah. So yeah, I think it'll be a great event this year, and like it usually is. So
Good. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating. Does anybody have any questions before we end it, or any comments? Not seeing anybody with any questions or comments. We'll see you next week. Thank you.